So certainly thank you for coming this morning. It's always difficult straight after the banquet dinner the night before. And in getting started, I'd like to thank the organisers for the invitation to present here today. And as I'm chairing the session, I'll give my presentation first and then go with the other three presentations afterwards. I guess what I'm looking at this morning is slightly different to a lot of the other presentations previously that we've had over the last few days. And I'm actually looking at coaching practice. And just as an overview, as far as this particular presentation, I want to look initially as far as some of the literature outlining coaching effectiveness and expertise, then have a look as far as previous literature in relation to systematic observation and particularly on coaching behaviours. Then looking at some of the focus areas that the coaches that I've been working with in Australia have tended to have a look at in regard to their coaching practice. And finally just share with you a system that we've been using that's web-based as far as video analysis. Because we know that coaches certainly are very good at analysing athlete and player performance, but whether they have the time and are systematic as far as reflecting and evaluating their own performance. So if we look first of all as far as that coaching effectiveness, and it's certainly much more difficult than what it is as far as athlete performance, to really have a look as far as who are our successful or who are the coaches that have expertise. And in the past it's tended to be based often on the win-loss ratio, whether that particular coach has won a number of premierships, whether their athletes are world champions or have perhaps medalled as far as Olympic Games. So really linked as far as athlete performance is concerned. At times, as far as coaching success and expertise, in the literature is also related as far as athlete satisfaction or their enjoyment. So do athletes want to go and play under and be coached by a particular person? And the final aspect that is sometimes looked at is also the amount of experience. And some of the literature will have a look at once a coach has been at a particular level for over 10 years, then often they're referred to as far as an expert. But more recently, a definition has been proposed, and it's something that at the moment that current researchers are having a look at to try to validate. But the suggestion as far as this particular definition has three aspects. I've just put it up. So it's the consistent application of integrated professional, interpersonal and intrapersonal knowledge to improve an athlete's competence, confidence, connection and character in specific coaching contexts. I'd just like to unpack those three main areas. I think we'll all agree that knowledge is going to be imperative. And certainly in the past, as far as that professional knowledge, that's probably the aspect where, as far as coach education is concerned, a lot of the courses will spend the majority of their time. So the things as far as the technical and tactical, the fitness areas, nutrition, etc. What we found in the literature, particularly as we go to the more elite or professional levels, that we're now finding that interpersonal knowledge is vital. So where we look really as far as that team culture, the learning environment and the relationships that coaches have, whether it's with particular players, whether it's the admin, the sponsors or other coaching staff. And the final one, and it often gets quite neglected, is the intrapersonal knowledge. So again, as far as coaching expertise, those coaches that really have a system as far as self-reflection and evaluation. And that's the aspect particularly today that I want to highlight that I think is often ignored. If we have a look at that second aspect as far as athlete outcomes, then again this definition suggests that there should be 4 types of outcomes that coaches are aiming. So while you have a player under your care for a period of time, we're hoping that you enhance their competence, so certainly their skills, fitness, performance, etc. Hopefully their confidence, so they have enhanced self-worth, connection, as far as that social aspect of sport, and character, the respect for sport and for others. And again, when we look as far as the particular context, that they will differ, and certainly as far as priority and importance, in relation to whether you're a coach of a junior participation-based sport, whether it's a junior performance-based sport, so as far as some of our rep teams or academies, or whether you're actually at the professional adult elite as far as professional football or Olympic status is concerned. If we have a look as far as some of the literature when we talk about these expert coaches, and there hasn't been a large body of literature on this particular area, and even in relation to the expertise literature, it's often lacking as far as how much we really know as far as these coaches. But some things that have been identified, and most of this has been qualitative work, is that we know that expert coaches are knowledgeable, they're great teachers, they continually use keywords or cues rather than having lengthy instructions. They have a high priority on their communication skills. They use a greater use of questions rather than just telling players all the time. They're very detailed in their planning. They have contingency plans, so are very good as far as the what ifs and what might happen with this team or if my players do certain things. Over time, they develop intuitive decision making, so often you'll hear about coaches relying on their gut feel, but that's based on a lot of experience and knowledge in the past. They can be very precise in their assessment of athlete performance and very specific in their areas for improvement. They have strategic knowledge, so as far as knowing what to say and when to say it, which is vital. Again, the literature tends to suggest that they can provide better solutions to problems, and the atypical gets attention, whereas coaches at lower levels won't necessarily notice those. They appear to see more and offer better feedback to their athletes, so again, they're able to pinpoint as far as what the priorities, what's important, what's not important, and focus on those. As I mentioned previously, they have very good self-monitoring. So they know where their strengths are, they know the areas that they need to improve, and they actually do something about trying to improve those particular areas. Some of the systematic observation literature, again, will vary as far as the level of coaches. So we have some data as far as our high school or youth coaches, we have some out of the US as far as the college coaches, and then we have some at the professional or elite level. And from this literature, which stems back from the mid-70s, it tended to rely on the systematic observation or either of these two particular instruments, where it was a way of coding what coaches actually do. And from some of this information, it certainly was highlighted as far as how important the instructional strategies that the coaches tended to use. So certainly substantial periods of the training session or practice session was instruction-oriented, but rather than, again, it being a case of the coaches always just telling the players or the athletes, it was a case of using questioning, feedback, explanations, and demonstrations. So if I have a look just here with some of the literature, so if I start down the bottom, John Wooden, the legendary US basketball coach from UCLA going back into the 70s, when they did the systematic observation with him, 62, or close to 63%, was what they coded as far as instruction. But the thing to remember within those particular practices was that there was also a lot of activity in those sessions. So a lot of it was concurrent, and it was the use of those short cues while the players continued to run up and down the court as far as doing particular basketball type activities. Pat Summit, again, a NCAA coach as far as at Tennessee with a very high winning percentage. Her instruction's around 50% of the sessions, and that was over a season. If we look at the pro football and elite football, we're getting the same. So at this high level, the suggestion then is that they're highly focused as far as instruction is concerned. So that's what the practice currently is. Another study out of Canada looked at 5 national team sport coaches, and again, they found that for a national coach who tends to go more on the camp-type training situation, rather than the other examples were all on the week-to-week, where the players are pretty much, or the coaches, their players 24/7, here it's a case of in camp and at that national level, majority of the practice, or the type of instruction, is tactical rather than technical. And when talking to these particular coaches, they were assuming that most of the players already had that technical expertise. It was their role as far as enhancing the strategies and tactics that they were going to play internationally. It was also interesting at this particular level that the amount of punishment or scolds in a training session, so in front of others, will tend to be very, very low. If we have a look here, the other highlight from national coaches is the amount of time that they spend observing. And again, if we link back to some of the, to Mark Williams' talk the other day, where again the suggestion from the literature is that a lot of coaches will overcoach. So they need to be continually talking and giving instructions. Here with this, it indicates that there's quite a large amount of time where the coaches are actually observing and monitoring their players. Will then perhaps give guidance as far as questioning and a change of activities is concerned, but allows the athletes themselves to problem solve and identify the particular solutions. The other thing, and the last thing from this systematic observation information is that although coaches, particularly at the youth level, will often indicate that they don't have their players enough as far as training time is concerned, when we really have a look as far as what happens in that practice session, we find that often there's a large amount of inactivity. So again, if we look at the junior ice hockey or the rugby league and rugby union, 36 to 48%, whereas if we go down as far as the elite volleyball, again, that's around the 7%. If we go back to our definition earlier, as far as that context, then we know at the elite level it is going to be more structured, it's going to be more professional. The goals are probably going to be quite different, and certainly as far as that inactivity with the juniors, that yes, we want a social aspect, but again, we could probably use our time a bit more efficiently as far as there being more learning occurring during that session. We have a look as far as management and organisation, and again we take the context into account that working with elite athletes, we would assume that they can be organised fairly efficiently in a short period of time, and we also understand that if we go down as far as that youth level, particularly to the high school age, that in majority of cases, whether it's a coaching or a teaching session, it is going to take longer as far as getting that organisation and structure so that the rest of your session can run smoothly. And that takes around the 13 to 15% of a session. Videotaping some of these expert coaches in action, it reveals in particular that they're very good at simulating pressure within their training session. They have high intensity and enthusiasm in the session. There's a relevance as far as that competitive situation, and they're often based on simulated game conditions. So again, when we look at expert coaches in action, they're the components that tend to be quite uniform. We also know from the literature, however, that the coach's perception of their own behaviour is quite limited. And the literature illustrates that athletes' rating as far as particular things are more highly correlated than what the coach's own perceptions are. So we need to be very careful when we ask coaches themselves, regardless of what level they're at, as far as how much feedback, how much time they had on instruction, how active particular players were. If we look at some of the RPE data, and there was one or two presentations earlier, where again the coach's intended perception of a particular training session was lower than what the athletes themselves actually rated that particular session. So again, as far as that self-monitoring, as far as practice is concerned, coaches need to have a look as far as this particular aspect. So my suggestion is they videotape their athletes all the time. In most football codes now, every single training session is videoed. I would suggest to coaches that perhaps once every 4 to 6 weeks that they get mic'd up so that they're actually having a look at how effective their practice and performance is. So yes, they're evaluating their athletes, but are there small things that they could be doing perhaps a little bit more effectively? For a lot of the coaches that I've worked with in Australia, some of the areas in particular that they've wanted to have a look at is certainly their communication and also the scheduling and type of practice activities they do.